In 2015, Scott Cousins and I filmed an interview with Herbert Douglas. I hope this interview gives you a more personal look at Mr. Douglas's life journey and allows you to explore topics involving race and athletics and business, personal motivation, and childhood dreams and fears.
My name is Herbert Douglas Jr. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When I was 5 years old, my sister was being born at the McGee Hospital. My mother was 27 and my dad was 41. And as he traveled to the hospital, he had a massive stroke. And he never saw his daughter. And he only saw me for 5 days. 5 years, yeah. See there? You want to interview this?
Yes, I did.
You got it right. You got it right. 5 years. And he never saw another day. Now, what did he do? He raised his family, my mom and him. My mom was his eyes for 51 more years. And he was in business, and they continued their business. And he ran a business for 30 years, and of those 30 years, 24 years he was sightless, he was blind. Now, fortunately, my dad, he got the fourth seeing eye dog in the United States. And he walked with a seeing eye dog from 1930 until he died in 1978 at the age of 51. And at the age of 90, he was really the champion in the Douglas family. He was 90 years old at that time, and the oldest person walking with a seeing eye dog. Now, I was getting a doctorate degree down at Xavier University, and I ended my speech with my dad taught me how to analyze, organize, initiate, and follow through. So I mentioned that anything you go into, if you can follow those basics, you can reach your potential better than not doing it. And you learn a lot. Naturally, you can't be a doctor, you have to be a doctor, but still those principles still are great for that, and others too.
You can apply it
I was a track man, I had to analyze myself. I couldn't be a shot putter because I was too small, but I could be a sprinter. But the bottom line is it's hard work. I was very fortunate to run. I remember my mother sitting up in the bleachers when I was, I guess about 9 or 10 years old, and she had an umbrella. It was very hot. And I weighed, I think, about 70 or 75 pounds. And this was the elementary school. It was that's the way they graded us to run against competitors. And that's when I learned I could run. And my mom was always there when I'd run throughout my life. She didn't have enough money to go to the Olympic Games, but she's very supportive. She was my public relations person. And also for my dad, because he was just, I'd say, productive. He was just as visionary. He had to be visionary because he couldn't see. And he visioned. And within this little cocoon, my grandmother, very pleasant lady, a lot like his grandmother, Mrs. Cousin, and my sister never told anyone I was an Olympian. No, she really never did. And she got married, her husband just happened to find it out because it didn't mean anything. She loved me because I was her brother. And the interesting thing, now my mother, she would tell everybody that I was an Olympian, but my mother never congratulated me. And that's the truth. You know, like when I went to high school and won 3 state championships and come back, neither my dad or her ever congratulated me. And, you know, and I just thought it was a normal thing. I really did, until I visualized that. I can see athletes and how their parents grab them and hold them. But being an Olympian, that didn't mean anything. When I made the Olympic team, then I came home right after that, and she was saying, "Oh, you'll do better next time." That's all. She didn't even think I made the Olympic team. So, but see, yeah, the fault was at that time we didn't have communication, media, and what have you. Not 66 years ago.
I was reading about how you experienced the 1936 Olympics. Was via reading out of the newspaper initially, and I thought that was really interesting because that is totally different from today. How kids get their news, they would see it on the TV.
Well, that's the only way. They get it on the newspaper. And if you ever do any research, go to the Pittsburgh Courier, and then also compare it with the 36 Olympics. Now, the 36 Olympics, that was a renaissance period for African American in sports. Okay, as an athlete, that's how I built a foundation. And I continued in life, and I used my dad's principles, and I used my athletic aggressiveness. And as growing up, I'd never really lost a race until I got to a national championship. And that was from the time my mother saw me in elementary school until I went to the state championship in 1939. And then the next year, I won all 3 events, but I lost the 100 that year. But that really enabled me to learn how to lose. See, you can't be a good sport unless you lose. So you should always remember that.
It was interesting. I was reading that you had said that part of the reason that you decided and focused on being an Olympian was because at the time you couldn't play baseball, you couldn't play football.
No professional sports,
Yeah.
only boxing.
Yeah.
So all of us African Americans, when we saw Jesse Owens, that was tremendous. Jesse Owens was the icon of those games. But my hero was right in Pittsburgh. His name is John Woodruff. And he won a gold medal. He won a gold medal in the 800 meters. Track and field is very territorial unless you're an icon like Jesse Owens. So I knew John Woodruff, and he inspired me, and Jesse did too, naturally. And then on the West Coast, a guy by the name of Archie Williams. He inspired a lot on the West Coast. And another gentleman by the name, he won a gold medal. And another gentleman who won a silver medal in the 200 meters. Matthew Mac Robinson placed second to Jesse Owens.
Okay,
Or he would have been the fastest 200 meter guy in the world.
okay. And his brother,
And his younger brother, who admired him, just wanted to make the Olympic team.
right,
11 years later, broke the color barrier for athletes to go into baseball.
wow.
Yeah. And he was a good athlete himself. He would have made the 1940 Olympic team and the 44 for 12 years because of World War II. There were no Olympic Games. I met Jesse Owens when I was 14 years old.
Okay.
My mother took me to listen to a speech that Jesse Owens was doing for a candidate president of the United States. His name was Alfred Landon. Jesse campaigned for Alfred Landon in 1936. And that's when I first met him. But I didn't see him anymore until I got to college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was interested in some of the footage that you use in your film. When was the first time that you saw it? Like, because I saw part of the trailer that I saw showed like everyone in the stands cheering Jesse Owens, and it showed Hitler kind of sitting there looking not too happy, and it kind of gave me goosebumps a little bit because it seemed like a powerful moment to
Now
have.
that was the first time that those of us of color ever witnessed white people cheering for us in that manner. Sure, they cheered for Joe Louis, but not like in the Olympic Games with 100,000 people cheering for Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens, yeah. I was working out of Atlanta for Pabst Brewing Company. And I wanted to get closer to my parents in Pittsburgh.
Oh,
So I moved here.
okay.
And I've been here now, I guess 60-some years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
long time.
Very long time. And the company you worked for,
Then I moved to Shefflin.
right,
And the reason my corporate, experience was with Shefflin.
right.
They were importers of wines and spirits. And that company was founded by the Shefflin family. And that was a pharmaceutical drug house at the time. 1793. That's when 221 years.
Now, are they part of Hennessy?
Yeah, they're the importer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're the importer. Now, see, before repeal in 1933, you could buy Hennessy, but you had to get a prescription. It was a medicinal, it was medicine.
Interesting.
And being medicine, yeah.
Oh,
You had to get a prescription. After repeal, you could buy it over the counter.
okay.
And 30 years later, I worked for them.
Yeah.
And that was 1963 until actually 1993, 30 years.
30 years.
24 years as an employee and 6 years as a consultant. And I'm going to travel. Next year will be their 250th anniversary, and they've selected me to represent them next year. And I've been away from there 27 years, so I feel very privileged that
Yeah.
they're having me come back. Yeah, I have I'll bring it down.
Now, didn't you say you're doing a commercial with Gabby Douglas, or Hennessy was trying to put a commercial together? Or?
Gabby is in this film, the Renaissance period.
Oh.
American Inspiration.
Oh, the one you saw. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The corporate, I've been rather fortunate corporate-wise. I worked for Pabst for 12 years and 30 years for Shefflin and Co.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because everything that I read online, it says that it basically says you were in the Olympic Games, and then it talks about you working for Shefflin, and I was curious as to what happened in between the Olympic Games and when you started working for Shefflin. So were you at Pabst?
Well, I worked for Pabst
Okay.
for 12 years.
So was that-
Yeah, all the southeastern states. And during that time, all throughout the Southeast was very pregnant.
I was going to say, it had to be
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
And you were basically,
I had to be careful.
what was your job position?
Well, I was a representative.
Right.
And the reason they can't deny what I did, I could only work with black accounts. So, and their sales went over everybody in the country. Yeah. And that's why.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
They
that's
couldn't, for once, they couldn't say, oh, so-and-so was doing all
Yeah,
that.
that's right. Yeah, they could.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm where I am now.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And then they give me credit over in Cognac, France. See, Hennessy was one of our products. Moet Champagne is another one. We had Teacher Scott, but I was successful with two of them, but I wasn't too successful in the Scotch category. From the athletic standpoint, I guess the epitome was winning a medal. And a sports psychiatrist said, you thought about making the Olympic team first and standing on the podium second, but not winning a gold medal. And I analyzed that over the years because the fellow who won, I was faster than him. I also had excellent body control because I was a gymnast.
Right.
That's why they think Gabby Douglas and I are related.
Oh, right.
Because I won 3 city championships in Pittsburgh in gymnastics. Every step where there's a demonstration, we bounce up another step. And this is going to be a good step. And primarily because we're going to have a beige society in not too soon. A decade or not too soon. Yeah. We're going to have a beige society, and that's the way this is going to change also.
People used to
See
say
it happening.
Yeah, people used to tell me everybody's going to be your skin color in the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, I feel those going to be soon. I went down to Mississippi and I worked on the South. And it's acceptable. Now, prior to, desegregation, prior to all the breakdown of racial relationships, there was only 2 or 3 of us on every team in the United States. And we knew everybody, and we were friendly. Today, football, 80-some%, or basketball rather, 80-some%, football, 60-some%. And it's acceptable. Now, while I was playing football at Pitt, they called me everything but a son of God. And I didn't play that much. I was really on the second team. And one thing they build up, even over my athletic accomplishment, is that I scored a touchdown against Notre Dame and was an Olympic medalist. But the touchdown against Notre Dame was so focused at that time that was more significant than winning an Olympic medal. And there were no African Americans on the Notre Dame football team.
What year
Now
was
they have
that?
a quarterback,
What year was that, Mr. Douglas?
45.
45. You were a sophomore or junior at that time at Pitt?
Yeah, I was a sophomore.
Sophomore.
Yeah, you couldn't play during my time unless you were, a sophomore. I was one of 3 to first play football at Pitt.
How did you deal with the discrimination, like personally? What was your process for handling it?
I would say intercessively. I grew up in an integrated community. my grandfather bought the house that we still own in 1918. So in 2018, it'll be 100 years in our family. So I grew up with Italians, Polish people, Hungarians, and all that. So I blended in, and it wasn't much of a challenge then because I was the only African American in this part of the community, and that was in the Hazelwood section of Pittsburgh, which Jones and Laughlin, most people worked in the Jones and Laughlin Steel. And the reason they lived there is so they could walk to work. Now, up about a mile up on a street, running into the main artery where my grandfather bought Hazelwood Avenue, there was an African American colony community. And I'd go up there and play, and I'd also play, in my immediate area.
I do remember many times with Mr. Douglas, my father, my cousin Ricky, my uncle Percy. On a Saturday morning, it was my favorite thing to sit there and listen to them debate anything. Didn't matter what it was, and it changed on a continual basis. But it was like sitting, learning how to debate, learning how to articulate your argument, be able to listen to the other person's opinion, really listen to it, evaluate what you felt they were saying, and address it in a way that after a nice, good, heated debate, everyone was able to walk away loving each other still and laughing and have really gotten something from the conversation. And I used to use that as my model as I went out to try to deal in business and be successful.
Where does education begin in life? It begins in home. And I would say that I had a very good home because I learned from my mother, I learned from my dad, I learned from my sister, and more so I learned from my grandmother. In this little cocoon, that's a house on Hazelwood Avenue. Now everything was positive. Everything was positive from the standpoint during those years. Everybody in that house said, you gotta get an education. And that was more so than being an athlete. Because my dad only knew baseball, he didn't know football. My mother, she knew track because she could run pretty good. So they weren't athletes. That wasn't an athletic family. This was a business family. So I would say the most memorable thing was the harmony, the cohesiveness in my little family of 5.
Where do you think that a kid growing up in a community who doesn't have that cocoon and the harmony in their family, where do you think that they could look?
Well, 50% of marriages breaking up today. Children don't have that advantage. They don't have the communities like they used to have, whereby you'd go to school and if the teacher reprimanded a student, she would tell the mother or father and they'd be reprimanded again. Children today don't grow up with the same rules, we'll say. They change, and you have to change with it. So my advice to a youngster is to take those 4 principles that I conveyed and stick to that. The aggressiveness to win. I wanted to be on top, and so I started In school, you get lesson plans and to teach. Teaching is what? Selling.
That's right.
And that's what I brought
Yeah.
to the equation way back there 60 years ago. And now the corporations would know that blacks did this and blacks bought that, but they never defined it like I did
Right.
at that time.
Okay.
And coming out of college, they didn't even know where the black community was. They just say go over there on so-and-so street and so-and-so. But I defined it with, the living pattern and how we followed the Jewish people and the Italians and what have you.
And how did you parlay that together? Like, how did you realize that?
The Lord, I guess,
Yeah.
really put it together. And I'm third African American to become a vice president of a national, company in the one in the spirit. So
Yeah.
I had to come up with something to document.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, nobody could refute it.
Right.
Refute it because I was there and I did it.
Like you talked about your father starting his own business.
1906, that's when the cars come into the United States. And he was a chauffeur, so he was smart. He learned how to drive. He got a license. Now, in driving, he was a little ahead of the climate at that time of African Americans owning cars too. And he owned a car. Well, with him learning that and being a chauffeur, like for a senator over there on the western part of Pennsylvania, he heard them talk about business. They might have even helped him because when he started his little business, it was nothing but a two-car garage. And what he did, now physically, he took care of rich people's car. That's what he did. He quit chauffeuring, took care of rich people's cars, waxed them, and it wasn't like waxing today where you rub it on and rub it off.
Yeah.
You had to compound it, you had to shine it. So he must have been a strong individual at that time. Then he moved to a garage that held 35 cars. And the community, he was shrewd enough, and he may have picked up from being a chauffeur because it was in the late teens, or the early 20s rather, when they built high rises but no garages. And in this community, the shady side of Pittsburgh,
Okay.
was a middle income.
Yeah.
So he was fortunate to get this garage.
Garage, yeah.
Now, that garage today
Yeah.
is not a garage. They converted it in shady side as the elite place
Right.
for kids and all like that. And they got bars there and what have you. So it's not a garage. It's-
Similar to Atlanta with Buckhead.
Yeah, that's right. Then, two blocks up, he finally ended up with this garage. 3 stories, 1 story down, 4 stories. It held 250 cars.
Steady growing.
Huh?
He was steady growing. Always looking to grow.
Yeah.
Not take the money and go start buy.
My mom handled the money.
Yeah.
And I don't think he could. He couldn't use it like his son. But anyway, the deal was he finally got this garage, and he had, I don't know where he got the idea, but if you look back at old ads there, Douglas Old Boy Auto Polish. And that was for furniture. You could rub it on and rub it off.
Okay.
He was ahead of the curve
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And for cars. Now, when I was real young, cars used to have spokes, wire spokes.
Right.
And he had me there working with these guys washing cars, and I had to use a spoke brush.
Okay.
And then I could get in the car, and they didn't have vacuums. They had whisk brooms, and I had to do it
Okay.
on the inside.
Uh-huh.
That's what I learned.
You
And
learned
then
how to
when
work.
They gave me a job.
Yeah.
I worked from 8 at night to 8 in the morning.
Seriously.
Yeah, I did that for 3 years before I went to Pitt, because I was deferred, put in class 3D primarily because my dad was helpless. He couldn't run it,
Oh,
he had a
right.
heart.
Right,
And
right,
young
right.
people had to take defense jobs.
Oh.
And as a result, I was put in class 3D and didn't have to go to the service.
Oh.
That's why I didn't go.
Oh, okay.
But that's how I believe.
Yeah.
And Oliver of Oliver Iron and Steel, which is a big name in Pittsburgh, I actually believe he knew him well enough to start his little business.
Yeah.
He got this little 2 garage.
Yeah.
He held on to the money.
Yeah.
And then he went to this 35 the garage.
Mhm.
And then he went on up 200.
Who has affected you the most when you've met them, other than Jesse Owens, when you met him initially, but going
The
around?
most honorable man I have ever met was the chancellor at the University of Pittsburgh. His name is Mark, M-A-R-K, A is middle initial, Nordenberg, N-O-R-D-E-N-B-E-R-G. He and I, last 20-some years, we've been real close. And he put me on the board of trustee at Pitt, I remember they put me in the Hall of Fame up in New York AC, and he presented me, and he said, Herb, he's a strong worker, and he paid the accolades, but the most important thing he said, he's my mentor. And, I'm only 30 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the high profile, the most admired man in the world was Nelson Mandela. And when I met, did you read the article that I wrote on it?
Yeah.
He come down, and then, he come down looking like, he reminded me of Sugar Ray Robinson, because he was a boxer.
Yeah, he was. Yes, he
He
was.
came down the
Yes.
staircase, and I got my guys, standing beside him.
Yeah.
He goes right over to me and said, "Welcome, Herb." And I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
on the ball." He just seen some pictures. Yeah, and he's 4 years older.
Yeah.
So that was the best interview, or that was the best visit I ever had at his home in South Africa.
Yeah.
But Obama, I admire him. I don't know, but just met him. But I admire him because of the obstacles that he has overcome. And he's a winner. And he's winning. When they think he's losing, he's still a winner.